Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and welcome to the third Do CEO Forum. My name's Richard Dean and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for this evening. Now this evening, the CEO Forum, it's part of the Do Leadership series. And the theme this evening is really this. It's about the power of the web and it's about open innovation. And I've got to say, I can't think of anybody better to talk about these things than Chris Anderson. And if you think about Chris Anderson's work, his writings, his insights, if you're a fan, as I unashamedly am, one of the things I take away is his focus on adaptability. Business models, business leaders, they've got to be adaptable if they're going to survive and if they're going to thrive in the digital era. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of Do, Mr. Usman Sultan.
It's a real privilege for me to be standing and with this prestigious audience. It's a special pleasure. I very often stand and have to make talks about business issues, and since I am what is holding you from our guest speaker, Chris, I will not be long. I just want to say that this forum has a particular meaning and a particular place in my heart, because we are not here to talk about business and the usual forums or encounters that we have. We are here to try to think in a different way. We are here to try to open our minds into something that we all can see happening around us. And I don't think that I need to be very eloquent to convince each and every one of you on the tremendous impact that the internet, that the digital space is having in our lives. As organizations, every time we encounter some of you, and some of you we have the privilege of meeting in our customer advisory board because we want just to listen, I hear the same question. We feel that we need to do things differently now. We feel that the way we communicate, our employees are communicating, the way people are now communicating is different. Things are changing, but what better evidence than as well the change in nations and history? I have here Sam from Al Arabiya, and you have been showing, you have been contributing in changes, dramatic and accelerated changes of history that we have been witnessing, and the digital space played an immense role. When change is a little bit faster, we call it disturbance. When the plane goes very fast from one altitude to another, the pilot would just call everybody, we're going into a zone of turbulence. But when change becomes very fast, then we feel it as crisis. We feel it as disruption. And a lot of us are feeling that this is happening. When I think of probably the most impactful innovation that happened in the last year, that is social networking, I believe that we had nothing to do in the telecom industry. I believe that the IT or the telecom had nothing to do. It just happened from people who created a way to communicate in a different manner among themselves. In the world we are living, I am convinced that being connected is going more and more to become a basic human right. That seems a little bit strong, but more and more we see this happening, and believe me, this will happen faster than we all expect. That is the field in which I'd like to throw some food for thought, and I would like all of us to be inspired today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, would you please join me in welcoming to the stage for the first time in Dubai, Chris Anderson.
Thank you, Do, for giving me this opportunity to come to Dubai. My first visit here, I arrived late last night, went for a run along the beach at midnight, which is absolutely the right way to experience Dubai for the first time. It was spectacular. I'm going to be talking tonight about something I think Do represents as well, which is not about technology itself, but about the impact of technology, how it changes our lives, and how technology enables us to change the world around us. We see it in all sorts of ways, but it is the story of our time. History will be written that the late 20th century, the early 21st century, was one where regular people changed the world because they had extraordinary tools with which to do so. I'm going to be talking about the next wave of the digital revolution. We're 20 years into the web age, we've seen what it can do, but largely it's been constrained to the world of digital material, digital things, and yet here we are in the real world, the world of physical objects, the world of atoms, not bits. What would happen if those same revolutionary forces were to play out all around us? I call this a new industrial revolution, and I'll explain why in a minute. But these are the only words. This is my thesis, and from here on, it's pictures. So don't worry. But this is simply it. That what we've learned over the last 20 years is that we have not just new technologies, new communication methods, new ways to work with computers. But what we've learned is we've got a new way to work together. That what the web created was, above all else, a new innovation model, beyond companies, institutions, and governments. Ones where we could collaborate, cooperate, co-create on our own terms, on our own projects, without permission needed. And that unleashing of creativity, thanks to access to technology, is really what's created this wave of innovation and experimentation that defines our era. And now we have the opportunity to do this with physical objects. Let me explain why. An industrial revolution is a big word. I mean, you don't throw this around lightly. The first industrial revolution was, more than anything else, the liberation of the mind. What we took was, humankind was essentially muscle power. We were working the land. We were using our brute force, and we let machines take over that role, and we became more about brain power. Fundamentally, that's what machines do: is they replace muscles with iron, and they let us do something more interesting. We became known for our ideas. We became educated. Suddenly, the mind was the most valued commodity. Now, the creation of these factories, first in late 19th century, in 19th century England, and then the rest of the world, did many wondrous things to society. It extended the lifespan by doubled it, lowered infant mortality, improved quality of life, created the urban environment, created the modern city as we know it. But it had one slightly mixed consequence, which is that it concentrated people and economic activity around the factory, around a single thing. And the factory was owned by a company. And what happened is that it concentrated power in the hands of the few. It concentrated power around the interests of the factories, the economic calculus that could justify these massive buildings and iron machines. And we created mass manufacturing, and we created the mass market, and we created, in some sense, the one-size-fits-all economy that mass manufacturing requires. And it forced people to work for the machines rather than the machines for them. Now, this was a good thing in many ways. It urbanized and modernized. It allowed us access to cheap goods, created modern globalization. You know, it's hard to argue with any of that stuff. But it is a little counter to the web model. This is the opposite of democratization. This is concentration. Concentration around the means of production, to use Marx's phrase. So, that was the first industrial revolution. You could argue that the second industrial revolution was the digital revolution. But it wasn't just the invention of the computer, it was the democratization of the computer. The mainframe was powerful and exciting and wondrous, but it wasn't until the personal computer that we really saw what computers were capable of. Now, I'm going to divide the two aspects of the digital revolution into the ability to create and the ability to distribute. I've chosen on the left not a picture of the personal computer, but a picture of the laser printer. This was the first laser printer, the Apple LaserWriter from 1986. And the reason I did it is because there was something really magical about that moment. You'll remember the Macintosh came out in 1984. And then the laser printer came out the next year, and this is the concept of desktop publishing. And today we take this for granted, but at that time, desktop publishing was a mind-blowing concept. Remember, printing plants were factories. The media industry of the 20th century owned the means of production. They had a monopoly on distribution. They had a monopoly on consumer attention because they owned the factory. Publishing was not for you. Publishing was for them. Publishing was for big companies, not individuals. And publishing certainly didn't happen on a desktop. And yet here it was, the laser printer, which could publish with its high quality as a professional printer. The Macintosh, which would allow you to have the tools of 300 years of media in your hands. But that wasn't enough. What you could create with a LaserWriter was a church newsletter or a lost dog poster or something that could be printed in a small number, 10, 20, 30, whatever, until you ran out of paper. It didn't make you a media company. It didn't make you a publishing giant. It simply meant that you could design, but not distribute. And then along came the second necessary element, democratizing the means of distribution, and that was the web. And now suddenly we understood what it meant to disrupt publishing. We understood what it meant to democratize the tools of production in media. Suddenly, everyone didn't just have a voice, but they had a megaphone, and they changed the world. And we have seen this in my industry. We lost a monopoly. I have a skyscraper. My company has a skyscraper in Times Square in the middle of New York. Thank you, 20th century monopoly. It's a great thing to have a monopoly. But we, like the rest of the media industry, has lost it because our tools, the ability to create and distribute, are now held by everybody. Now, we're doing fine because we found a way to navigate and do something that we exclusively can do well, but it's not based on a monopoly anymore. It's based on competition.